Okay, so this is part two, meant to be part one. I thought I'd wrap that up in 15 minutes, but you know me, I like to chat. So this will only be, I'm not going to say this is going to be 6 minutes, it'll probably be 15. So this is part two of part one, if that makes sense. Anyway, we'll figure this out as we go along. I'm happy, by the way, send me comments if this is just a mess, just say it, okay? So a little bit of theory here that we'll just go through. Okay, so the minimum wage is extremely topical. Okay, because we live in Europe, we have a minimum wage in nearly every single European state, and it's been brought in for all societal and economic reasons. Okay, we'll go into that later on. In fact, we'll go into it now. There's a lot of parts, and we've spoken about this depending on your economic system. So, for instance, if you're a free market system like the US, they don't generally have minimum wage rates in a lot of US states, because the whole idea there being, if you work hard, you'll get a promotion. So work hard and you'll be successful. And if you don't work hard, well, maybe you deserve, been on tips or being on nothing. So very quickly, again, you can read this, and what I want is any questions you have, or if you don't study a concept, just ask me in comments and we can go through it, or I can make a video like this. So the advantages of the minimum wage rate, a lot of them are societal, of course. Increased standard of living, increased aggregate demand essentially means that more people getting paid more money means that there's a bigger demand, a societal demand has increased, which means more goods and services will be produced. More employment, because more people want to work, because getting paid better. Wage rates may increase. Well, that's obvious. But also it means wage rates can increase for other people as well. So when we looked at the other wage graph, or the minimum wage graph we did with the straight line, and when it goes up to a normal supply curve, the other additional wage rates can increase. You might have been on a tenner an hour, and now the minimum wage is brought in, and now they might bump you up to 12 or 13 euros an hour. So wage rates can increase throughout the whole sector. Okay. Disadvantages is obviously for the employer, higher labor costs, which is obvious, loss of jobs, because again, it just becomes unaffordable. There was a big controversy about 5 years ago when legislation was brought in to increase to have on Sundays and bank holidays that you would have to pay double the minimum wage. So you had a lot of cafes and restaurants, very small local businesses, been forced to pay their staff a minimum of 20 euros an hour. And we've talked about this, if you have 3 or 4 staff on, it's costing you 60 to 80 euros an hour as a fixed cost. There's no way you can sell scones or coffee or soup or tea or whatever to offset those increased in costs. As a result, a lot of coffee shops closed on a Sunday, or they said we were unable to open on a Sunday or a bank holiday. So it can work the other way. Higher selling prices, again, if you want to maintain your profit margin, you're just going to have to increase the price. Increased risk of relocation. This is massive. So again, maybe just highlight this if you're taking down these notes. What's happened in Ireland over the last pretty much 20 years is that our manufacturing industry is gone completely. We basically don't really manufacture anything anymore, except for really high-end quality goods like pharmaceuticals or tech. And what's happened is most of our manufacturing industry has gone to other countries. So the China, the Vietnam, the Bulgarias, and where the wage costs are way lower. So that's what we mean by relocation. It means the company just saying, nah, we're gone. We're going to leave, irregardless of what grants they get. Okay. Couple of other things. Trade unions, those doing business will know something about trade unions. We're not going to go into huge amounts of detail on it, but you can kind of figure out what a trade union is. So a trade union represents its members, and they can be very influential in negotiating with an employee to ensure that the minimum wage is paid or a particular wage rate is paid. Okay. Trade unions, you should know some examples in Ireland. For me as a teacher, it's the ASTI, the Association of Secondary School Teachers in Ireland. There's the INTO, there's SIP2, there's Mandate, there's loads of them. Okay. And they will negotiate with both employers and with the government, especially for public servants. Okay. So just a couple of things with wage rates. There's pressure now with high unemployment. So for instance, right now with high unemployment, with the recession that's going on, we still need to pay the minimum wage. But that's causing obviously problems for employers who don't have a lot of income coming in. And wage rates could fall for the other sector. So while there's a minimum wage rate, if you're on income in excess of the minimum wage rate, your income might fall as well, because there's too many people. There's an increase in supply. Etc. This is a thing called wage drift. Okay, this is a document or a picture that I got from the European Union. There's a really good European Union economics website. I must show it to you now next time we're in. This is just this thing called wage drift. It can pop up in a short answer question, okay? So wage drift, what happens here? It occurs when wage levels rise above the negotiated levels. So you can see here, if you can see here in the blue line is essentially the wage rate, okay? Forget about the zeros and the twos. This is just the baseline. The baseline is zero. But what you can see in the European Union from, again, 1999 to 2018, so you're looking here at 20 years of data, you can see that the wage drift is kind of gone above and below the negotiated wage line. So for instance, look there at 2009 and 2009, you can see that the negotiated wages were quite low, but yet the actual real wage was a little bit higher. So you can see it there, 2009, 2010. So the question might be, well, why would that be the case? Why might the real wage be higher than the negotiated wage? And there's a couple of reasons for that, mainly because the wages aren't your income alone. You might get bonuses, you might get overtime payment, but also because some companies during a recession may decide to hold on to their employees. So rather than letting them go or running the risk of them migrating to another country like Australia or New Zealand or Canada, where a lot of Irish employees have gone, they might retain them, continue to pay them high wage rates just to make, knowing full well that the recession will end eventually. And again, that's what kind of happened, okay? We'll come to that again later on. All right. So I'm going to finish this off with just looking at a couple of exam questions. All right. These are the ones from StudyClix. Okay. And this is kind of what we should be looking at really. So this was from the sample paper, I think, that we all saw. Very simple one. And it says the diagram below shows the demand and supply of labor. Using this diagram, state the equilibrium wage level. Now, read that again. State the equilibrium wage level. This is higher level as well. So where is the equilibrium wage level? We can kind of do it here. Let's just knock that off for a second. Go away, you. Get this out of the way. All right. Oh, there we go. There we go. So where is the equilibrium wage level? Well, it's not a difficult thing to do. It's kind of right there, isn't it? Let me just do this in red. So the equilibrium wage level is down here, 15,000 workers and 10 an hour. So that's E. And you need to say this. That looks like a euro symbol. So that's E. E for equilibrium. There's your equilibrium wage rate. Not that difficult to do. Okay. Now, that's only one part of the question. Get rid of this. Part two of the question. It says, using the diagram above, calculate how many people could lose their jobs if the government decided to introduce a minimum wage of 14 euros an hour. Okay. So at the moment, what's the equilibrium wage rate? The equilibrium wage rate at the moment is on a tenner an hour. So if the government decided to pay 14 euros per hour, which is right here, there's our equilibrium, what would happen? Well, bearing in mind that at 10, that's how many people are employed. If we brought it to 14, here's your minimum wage level now. What's going to happen there? Well, if 14 euros an hour, it means that businesses are only going to demand this. They're only going to demand 5,000 workers. And the question it asks is, it says, how many people could lose their jobs if the government decided to introduce a minimum wage rate? Well, let's work it out. This is how many people were employed. This is how many people are employed. So what's the loss? 10,000. Okay, let's keep going. Last two. Outline two advantages to the government of increasing the minimum wage rate. So why would the government increase the minimum wage rate? Again, simple stuff that we've talked about again. And then the last one here, it says, explain with the aid of a labour market diagram in each case how equilibrium wage rates are determined in a free labour market or in a labour market where the trade union has negotiated a minimum wage. So let's read the question again. Explain with the aid of a labour market diagram in each case how equilibrium wage rates are determined in a free labour market and in a labour market where the trade union has negotiated a minimum wage. Okay, well, that's two diagrams. Two diagrams in each case. I'm just going to do this very quickly. We'll do a quick sketch. One diagram. That's a terrible looking diagram. Let's just do that again. Down, across. That's even worse. But anyway, such is life. So what do we need? We need two color pens. So in a free labor market, it means that the demand is here, correct? There's a nice colorful one. And what's happening then with supply? Supply is here. Where's our equilibrium wage rate? Right there. Don't forget to put in price or wage, I say. And don't forget to put in quantity of labor. So QL, quantity of labor. And there's our equilibrium. So there's our WE and there's our QE. Now, in a labor market where the trade union has negotiated a minimum wage, well, we have spoken about this already. So what does it look like? Well, what does the supply curve look like? minimum wage. Minimum wage is here, goes like that, and it tips up. Now, can you please use, I forgot to put an S there, by the way. Can you please use rulers? Okay, I'm just sketching this on my tablet here. So there's our S, and where is our D? Well, generally what we do for this, I'm just going to change color here now. Let's go for green. Is our demand will generally fall about here. Okay, so our demand will fall about there. D for demand. Okay, now this again doesn't have a huge basis in reality. What essentially we're saying is, I'm just gonna use a highlighter here. And what we're essentially saying here is around this point here, some people are going to be getting the minimum wage, okay, and other people along up here are going to be getting in excess of the minimum wage. But in essence, and everyone here, by the way, is getting the minimum wage. So in essence, what we're saying here is that this right here is the equilibrium point, and that is QE. Okay, and that's our labor market where the trade union has negotiated a minimum wage. There's our minimum wage coming straight across, but some people pay in excess of minimum wages. Now, have I forgotten anything? Of course I have. Well done for pointing it out. We have a wage here, and we have our quantity of labor here. Okay, that's it. Shine. And they're the only questions on labor on this particular section. So what I'd like you to do just before we get our exam papers is just chip into your book, and onto your book I'd like you to try and do these questions here. Okay, so I'll put this up on Teams. I will put this up as an assignment on Teams, and again, all I want you to do is they're just questions from the book. Draw a few things, draw a few diagrams, which we've done already, and that should really be that. Okay, please, can you just give me some comments? All right, just let me know if this is useful at all, if I've spoken too fast, if I've complicated it too much, if it's too long, if it's too short, if it's workable. If it's not, if I don't get any comments, I'm going to continue like this, and then you're going to be sitting at home going, oh, Jesus, Mr. Kern is waffling here again. These videos are crap. So please let me know. Comments. Right, 12 minutes. Oh, Jesus, longer than I thought. Cheerio, until the next time.